For me personally, Cookie is one of Jacqueline Wilson's more recent books that I really loved. When I say more recent, I mean it's one of her books that I read once I surpassed the target audience age. I've been reading Jacqueline Wilson since I was 8 years old, and she is very much one of the main inspirations behind why I fell in love with writing and why I now write. But I've never stopped reading her work, not just because I feel like I owe it to her, but also because I generally really enjoy her fiction, particularly the contemporaneous stories. Her historical fiction, not as much. But Cookie is one that I think is something I will always adore, and it always feels kind of prominent in my mind as well. This was released in 2008. I think I read it a couple of years after, and this is about a young girl called Beauty Cookson, and ironically, even though she's called Beauty, she is described as being quite plain. She's very timid. She is kind of a typical Jacqueline Wilson protagonist. She's not that outgoing, and she's quite shy and reserved. But also her home life is very difficult, living with an abusive parent, and that is something I will come back to in a moment. But her mother and the family decide to run away from that situation and go down to the seaside. And when Beauty is there, she kind of begins to feel a bit more relaxed, and she takes on a new hobby, which is, of course, baking, and hence the name of the book. And she goes on quite an interesting personal development journey. There's something specifically that she does at one point, which I won't go into in any detail, which I feel like was a really big step up for her self-confidence. I'm sure you'll know which bit I mean. I really do not want to spoil it, because it is full of a lot of fun and interesting things that happen as Cookie. She does change her name to Cookie, nickname, I guess, as she grows and develops as a person. But there's always that background threat of what the life they left behind is going to have, what kind of impact that's going to have on an ongoing basis. I really like it. I think the narrative's well developed. I think it's got a really good balance of realism and a little bit of chaotic fun as well. The language, I think, works really well. Amazon says that it's for school years 1 to 9. So that's what, age 6, 7 to 12 or 13, top of my head. I have a Scottish education, so translating it into English is a bit more difficult for me. But, roughly I feel like the vocabulary is reasonable enough for the target audience. I did have a look at some of the reviews online just to see what other people were saying, and actually it seems like a lot of people find that it's too intense and too upsetting, and there are certainly several moments in this that are quite shocking and are quite outrageous. But that's what Jacqueline Wilson does. She takes situations that real children face on, unfortunately, an all too frequent occasion, and helps the reader to realise that they're not the only people going through this, and that in most occasions there is help out there. I don't think that her descriptions are so vivid that they'd be traumatising, but she still manages to mention that these occasions happen, and she doesn't gloss over them. It's not just a simple case of things were too tough at home for Beauty Cookson, so here was a magical solution that fixed everything. It's a lot more realistic, and the problems are still ongoing. So personally, I feel like, although yes, some of the things that happen are quite upsetting, I don't think at any point that the description or the detail into which Jacqueline Wilson went with those events was too much. I personally really thoroughly enjoyed this, even as an older, mature, in air quotes, reader. I was kept engaged. It's quite a thick novel as well. The page count, according to Amazon, is 336. So for a Jacqueline Wilson book, it's got quite some weight to it. Very easy to get stuck into it. If you're a fan of Jacqueline Wilson and you haven't read it, I completely recommend it. I really adore it. I'd love to know your favourite Jacqueline Wilson book if you have one. This isn't my favourite. My favourite is Lola Rose. But it's a good contender for being high up there in one of the top 10 or 15. When she's written over 100 books, it's a bit difficult to narrow it down. But I do thoroughly enjoy it.